everyone, welcome. You're here today for our first event of spring. This is part of the Matador Success Series put on by the Office of Student Success. Today's conversation is student-centered. So Dr. Harris III is our guest today, a CSUN alum. I will pass the baton over to Bakari Woolley, a student who will do the introduction just shortly. But for those faculty and staff who are here, we're going to be having a second event March 30th with Dr. Frank Harris III. So we'll have a lot more conversation centered on staff and faculty later this month. And today's conversation will be focused primarily on students. So without further ado, I will introduce Bakari so he can introduce our speaker.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Like she said, my name is Bakari. I am a CSUN sophomore. I'm a psych major as well, but we're not here for me as much as I would love to be here for me. We're here to listen to a scholar in the educational community. He's a professor, an author, a speaker, a consultant, an advocate, and a father of 5. And yes, I did get that from his Twitter, if you wanted to know. Let me not forget that this brother is the professor of post-secondary education and co-directors of the Community College Equity Assessment Lab. That was a mouthful. At the San Diego State University. He brings awareness to underutilized, underfunded, and neglected populations, which is actually the topic of this presentation today. He wants the CSUN students to know, even though that we are at home, that our voices are being heard all across the CSUN faculty and staff. So please give our man, Dr. Frank Harris, the third, a very warm welcome as he is going to speak about the CSUN student experience.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you so much, Mr. Bakari Woolley Brown. That was fantastic. Thank you all for joining, CSUN students. I also understand we have some faculty, staff, and maybe a handful of administrators who've joined us today. So excited that you all have taken the time to come in and hear what I have to say. This session is for the students. And so, as I prepared for today and sort of thought about what I would like to share, I had the students in mind the entire time. And so I'm really excited about this because I don't get the opportunity to speak with students as often as I would like to. But to tell you all a little bit about myself, as Bakari shared, I'm Frank Harris III. I've been a professor at San Diego State for the past 14 years in the post-secondary education department. I also earned a bachelor's degree at Loyola Marymount University in communication studies back in 1997. And went to CSUN, immediately transitioned to CSUN in the speech communication department where I was a master's student there. I also taught Speech 151. Anyone, so for the students who are here, just raise your hand if you had the opportunity to take Speech 151. But that was a class that I taught for a couple years while I was a master's student at CSUN. Had a wonderful experience and really enjoyed it. And that really kind of helped me solidify my decision to work in education. So after that, I went and worked as an administrator for about 4 or 5 years before making a decision to transition and go back to graduate school. I did this at the University of Southern California in the Rossier School of Education, where I earned a doctorate in education. And unlike a lot of folks, I actually did my doctoral degree while I was also working full-time as an administrator. And so if there's anyone here, any students who are thinking about, wow, what is it that I should do? And, I want to get a doctorate, or, I'm not sure how to do it or what the path may be, I'd be happy to sort of talk about me and my decision and how it all worked out for me. But it was during that time as an administrator and also as a graduate student where I really sort of developed my passion for research. And so I got the opportunity to do a dissertation. So when you earn a doctorate, you have to write a dissertation. And your dissertation is primarily going to be the document that really serves as the foundation of your career, at least in the earlier stages of it. And so I decided to do my dissertation research on college men and masculinity. I had had been working as an administrator with student athletes. I had been working with fraternities, and I got to observe the ways in which men and masculine development happens in college, and got to understand some of the challenges that students were experiencing, as well as gotten to understand some of the things that we can do within institutions as educators to make that a smoother process for students. And so I did my dissertation on that topic. I got the interview and do focus groups with a lot of young men, a lot of college age young men, got to understand the things that, were important to them, challenges in their experiences, sources of support, things that really made a difference in their lives and in their experiences as college men. And from there, I transitioned into being a professor full time. And at that time, I was sort of at a little bit of a crossroads trying to decide, okay, do I want to be a professor or do I want to stay in administration? And it was around that time when, I was starting to have children. And I, in addition to being passionate about the research, I also felt like being a professor was more aligned with, the vision that I have for my life, both as a professional educator, but also, as a father and wanting to, to have more autonomy, to have more flexibility and to have a meaningful presence in the lives of my children. And so at that time, at the time I was completing my doctorate, my first son and second kid was born. And he is now a freshman in college, a freshman in high school. He's 14 now. Also have a 19-year-old daughter who's a freshman in college. I also have, as Bakari shared, I have 5 children. So I also have a 19-year-old stepson who's in college. And I have a 14-year-old stepson and a 9-year-old, soon to be 10-year-old stepdaughter. So, hands full, house full, the whole deal. But when I became a professor, my areas of research kind of expanded. So now I do quite a bit of work that focuses on student equity and student success. And I'll tell you a little bit about that shortly. I've continued to do work on men of color in education, but instead of just looking at what happens to men in college, I also look at the experiences of boys in high school and middle school. So that's a big part of my agenda. And have really started to do more intentional work and research around the experiences of college student athletes. I've had the tremendous opportunity to write 4 books. And I spend a lot of my time traveling the country, visiting colleges and universities, talking with educators about how they can best support students in their success. And, I would say a key part of my work is that it doesn't just focus on what happens in the classroom, but a big part of what I do focuses on what needs to happen outside of the classroom to make sure that students have the opportunity to be successful. And so I talk a lot about, how do you create a sense of belonging so where students feel like they belong at an institution, right? They're not just enrolled there, but that this is a place where they feel a sense of purpose and a sense of belonging. I also write and speak a lot about validation. And validation are, think about, when your advisor or your faculty member says something to you that reminds you of how smart you are, that reminds you of how capable you are, or that reminds you about important contributions that you have the capacity to make in your life and in your career. We find that from a student success perspective, validation is really important. And it's especially important for students who've been historically underserved in education. So thinking about our students of color, our students with disabilities, former foster youth, justice impacted students, right? So students who traditionally haven't necessarily, commanded a lot of focus and attention in education. We also talk a lot about, I also talk a lot about building relationships. And the way that I describe these relationships is that it's important for students, in order for students to be successful, they have to have relationships with educators that are grounded in trust, mutual respect, and authentic care. Trust meaning that I feel like as a student, that you as an educator have my best interest, that you're invested in my success, that you want to see me succeed so much that if I succeed, you're going to see my success as a reflection of your success and your effectiveness as an educator. At the same time, if I'm not successful, then you're going to ask yourself, not what's wrong with me as the student, but how could I have been better as an educator to make sure that that student had a better opportunity to be successful? Mutual respect is that I have to be able to to not only feel like I can teach you something, but I have to feel like I can learn from you, even though I may be the educator and you may be the student. I have to feel like our relationship and the respect that characterizes our relationship allows me to learn from you just as much as you can learn from me. And authentic care is the last piece, is where I really have to care about you, and not care about you in a casual sense, but care about who you are as a person. Care about your lived experience. Have some understanding of who you are and how did you get to CSUN? And what were some significant things that have happened to you that have had some impact on how you see yourself as a learner and the goals that you're pursuing, and all all of these things that we know are important to students, but have historically not been important to educators. And so I talk a lot about that, with my colleagues. Had the opportunity to work with thousands of colleagues at hundreds of institutions. And, I'm always humbled, not only for the opportunities. So I never take opportunities like this for granted, right? Opportunities to kind of talk, to share my work, to hear what folks have to say, to learn about others' experiences. But, also just opportunities to be in a space and to have the career that allows me to, I feel like I'm making a positive contribution to society. I think being an educator and being a professional educator is one of the best jobs, one of the best careers that you can have. And so I do, I don't take it for granted. I do really see it as a tremendous honor and a tremendous privilege. Some folks may be wondering, well, hey, Frank, how did you get involved in this? I mean, I would say a lot of it is serendipitous. I think there's always an element. You ask most educators, how did they become educators? I think most would say that there was some serendipity, that, they didn't necessarily, as they were starting college, think that, hey, I'm going to college to be an educator, right? Maybe you get folks who go in and say, I want to be a teacher. Most folks don't go into college saying, I want to go work as a college professor or as a college administrator. It's kind of something that you tend to fall into, so to speak. But in terms of, my own experiences, I mean, I've experienced a lot of some of the same things that I write about and that I speak about that impact student success. So, growing up in poverty was a part of it, having, formerly incarcerated parents. So, at one point being a student who was impacted by the justice system. And of course, experiencing racism, I think as a man of color, and then particularly as a, African-American male, racism, institutional racism has, unfortunately been a part of my journey and been a part of my story, and something I've had to cope with and overcome. And, a lot of that has had to deal with policing, but not all of it. I mean, there's, certainly been some instances and things that I can point to that have occurred to me within schools and colleges and universities that speak to issues related to racism. And so that has certainly has some impact on, how I see my work and how I go about my work as an educator and as a researcher. And so that's, so I would say in many ways, part of what I'm trying to do is to contribute insights that can make it easier for the folks who come after me, right? So for the students who come after me, for those who ultimately decide to become professors, to make their journeys a little bit easier. And so I think that's, if you ask me what's my mission statement, what's my vision for my life and my career, that would certainly be a part of it. And then lastly, and I think from here after this, we can pause and take a few questions. Folks usually like to ask me, what do I do in my free time? And I have to be honest, when when you're a professor and you have 5 kids, you don't get a lot of free time. But I do try to be intentional and making sure that I exercise good self-care. And so, I like to work out. I enjoy sports. I wouldn't say that I enjoy politics, but I do find that I spend a lot of time following what's happening politically, because I do think it should inform my work as an educator and a researcher. And then I'm a big fan of hip hop music. And so, I think it was, part of my journey and part of my lived experience, growing up ever since I was, someone who grew up in the 80s, you know, hip hop has kind of been a part of my journey. And so prior to COVID, I enjoyed going to concerts. You know, I listened to a lot of music, and that sort of sums it up in terms of a little bit about me. But this is a good time for me to pause and ask, are there questions? Are there things I can clarify? Anyone want to share any insights that, you know, might be brewing within them? And then for the students and the educators who are here, I do wanted to, I prepared a very, very short presentation to give you a little bit of insight into the research and work that I do, and kind of to help the students see, well, you know, what is it that you do and how does it have some impact on institutions? But at this point, I love to stop and ask questions, thoughts, and reactions to anything I've shared thus far. Yep.
Hey, we got Bakari, and all of you can use the chat function as well. It's open and live, so feel free to chat as we're going along. So Bakari.
How you doing, Dr. Harris?
Hey.
I just wanted to know, was there any wavering sensation when you were trying to achieve this goal of being an educator and all those titles I gave you earlier? Like, was there any sense of, was there any, what was the word I'm trying to use? Any people doubting you? I guess that's the best way to say it.
Oh, people doubting me? Yeah, absolutely. A lot of folks, you know, whether it's professors or, you know, advisors, people who should have been in a position to kind of help and guide me. Mm-hmm. Occasionally, you know how it is. I'm sure, you know, you run into a hater. Yeah. And, you know, a lot of times we think about our peers, you know, maybe a classmate or someone as being a hater, but sometimes it could be a person who's in a position of authority and who's in a position to help you, but for whatever reason, they don't see you as a model of success. Or when they think about, you know, what a professor looks like, or what a doctor or a lawyer or a social worker or a teacher looks like, you just don't match the vision for what they think that is. And rather than questioning the vision, they question you, or they may plant some seeds that leads you to doubt, that engenders, you know, doubt within yourself, right? And sometimes it's subtle, and sometimes it's pretty direct and pretty straightforward. And so I'll tell you a short story about that. So I remember when I was in high school, I went to Gardena High School. So I grew up in Los Angeles. I went to Gardena High School in the South Bay of LA County. And there was a college fair that my high school had. And so, you know, anybody who's been to a college fair, you get all the recruiters, they show up in the school auditorium. Everybody has their tables and their banners and their, you know, their handouts and the gifts and, you know, goodies and things like that. And so, you know, being a kid growing up in LA, I immediately went to find the UCLA table. Like, I want to go to UCLA. And the recruiter at the time was this guy. It was an African-American man, actually. That's kind of a key part of the story. So I went to him. I said, hey, you know, hello, Mr. So-and-so. My mom was with me also. You know, my name is Frank Harris. I want to go to UCLA. Can you tell me what it is I need to do to get there? And he immediately said, okay, well, what's your SAT score? Right? And I told him what it was. It wasn't very good, I will say that. And he said, well, you know, you're not going to get into UCLA with your SAT being what it is. But let me tell you what, there's some community colleges down here. You should go talk to them. Now, let me say, there's nothing wrong with community colleges, right? Going to a community college. I have great respect for the work that happens in a community college. Most of my work actually is focused on community college student success. But at the time, I didn't really understand, you know, the value of a community. So I took that as, you know, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not college material. I should go off and do something else. And so, you know, there's a lot of stories like that along the way that you, if you're not careful, you can internalize those things and you can really start to believe that something is wrong with you or that you don't have the capabilities of being successful. I mean, we can start to believe the hype and believe the narrative about who we are, right? Especially as a young man of color. And so that was a story, I think, when you say, hey, did you ever receive any messages of discouragement? That's certainly one that happened. And, there's maybe 10 others that I could easily tell, but that one I think is pretty representative of what I experienced from time to time. But I'll also say this, and let me say this really quickly. I had a lot of people who were encouraging and who were supportive as well. And I would say, I probably had just as, for every hater, I had somebody who had my back. What's interesting is that the stories you remember, however, are the negative ones, right? And I think sometimes we forget about the people that supported us, the people that encouraged us, the people that validated us. And so I think it's important, to acknowledge that, but also to keep those things in mind. But I appreciate the question. Thank you. I'm going to turn on the light. It's getting kind of dark in my home. So let me, 1 second. Okay, hopefully that's better. All right, any other questions?
Yeah, my name is Valentine. I'm a senior at CSUN, and I was wondering, how was the transition from going from CSUN to master's to doctoral program?
Yeah, thank you, Valentine. Good question. So when I finished my degree at CSUN, I didn't go right into the doctoral program. I actually worked for a few years before making the decision to go. And I got to be honest with you, I wasn't even really planning to do it. When I graduated from CSUN, I had decided, I don't want to be a professor. I want to just work, not just work, but I want to work with students outside of the classroom. So work in student affairs, that was sort of, my goal and my plan. And the only reason why I decided to get the doctorate is because I was working at USC at the time. And USC had this benefit that if you work there, you could take a class or two for free. And so after a few years, I was like, you know what? I'm kind of missing being a student. These classes are free. I don't really know, I don't know what was going to come of this, but, more education is always a good thing. And so I started taking classes. And then I just, I enjoyed it. And I just, I wasn't full-time. I'd take a class here, take a class there, take a semester off. And then after a while, it was kind of like, okay, I got all these classes. I may as well enroll in the program and actually maybe try to, string together a degree and do something with it. And so, it took me a while. I think I took my first class in 2001, maybe. And then I didn't finish my doctorate. So it took maybe 5 or 6 years. But that's kind of how I did it, just taking classes here and there along the way. And I was fortunate that I ran into, a few professors who was like, hey, I don't know what your plans are or what you're going to do, but, you're really good at this. Like, you can really go far, right? As a scholar. So, you have good ideas. You seem to write pretty well. I think you should, think about getting a degree and being a professor. And so, after you hear after hearing that, from some people that I respect, I started to take it seriously and ultimately decided to do it. And as I mentioned, I started to have children. And then, I decided okay, professor, administrator, either way, you're working in education. So it's not a question of, am I contributing in an area that I'm passionate about? The question was, how do I want to do it? What do I want my day to look like? Is ultimately what I decided. And then also just really enjoying being a researcher was a big part of it as well. So my path was a little bit non-traditional. Most people who get a PhD and who become professors, they just go right through, and they go full time. And, you know, if they work, they're working in a research lab. And so my path was a little bit different. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because I think it was harder in a lot of respects. I think there's probably easier ways to do it, but that's kind of how it happened for me, you know, for better or worse.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question. Any others? Love these questions.
Hi, Dr. Harris. My name's Samuel Millie. I'm a junior at CSUN, and I'm just curious. I'm looking to go to grad school, but I'm having like difficulties like figuring out what exactly I want to specialize in. So I'm just curious about how you figured out what exactly you wanted to do or
Yeah,
study.
good questions, Sam. Let me ask you this. What you said you're a junior?
Yeah.
What is your major?
I'm double majoring in art with the emphasis in graphic design and Central American studies.
Okay. What are you passionate about from an
Um,
intellectual perspective?
I would say I'm very passionate about just the arts overall and social justice
Okay.
from a broad perspective.
Art and social justice, you know, they work pretty well together. And so are you thinking you want to study art like an art historian, or you're more on the performance side of it?
That's what I'm trying to discover, like whether or not I'd want to either tell it more so from a historian perspective or more so be an artist and creating.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
So here's what I would do. I would first identify your favorite professor in the arts, and maybe schedule a meeting and talk with them about what it is. What was their journey, first of all? So how did they pursue their graduate studies? What decisions they made, and then be as clear as you can be about how do you see yourself working in the arts after graduate school. So one degree also you might consider as a MFA, a Master's in Fine Arts. And, an MFA gives you a few different options. I think it allows you to, of course, if you want to stay on the creative side, a MFA will certainly allow you to do that, but it also will allow you to teach if you want to, you see yourself being a professor. The MFA is actually the terminal degree in the arts. So it's like, in many ways, having a doctorate in the arts, because there's no PhD in art per se. So an MFA is a degree that I would check out as a starting point. And I would also start to look at different graduate programs. Now, here's the key. Folks often say, well, how do you know where to go? Where should you go? And I think there's two criteria you want to sort of keep in mind. Ideally, you're going to study, you're going to study with a professor who's doing work that is aligned with your interests and your passions. So there's some professor who studies and does work that combines art and social justice. So those are the folks you want to look out for. Those are the folks so if that person is at UCLA, then you want to go to UCLA or, wherever they may be. The other piece is funding. And so ideally, you want to go to a place that's going to give you scholarship, give you a fellowship, give you some kind of money, not a loan, right? But give you money to go to graduate school. And some folks say, well, why would someone pay me to go to graduate school? Well, there's a trade-off. So usually that means you're working in somebody's research center, or you're doing like what I did at CSUN. You're teaching, class, you're teaching Speech 151. You're teaching 2 or 3 sections of that every semester. But that's kind of the trade-off. But I would start with maybe identifying a professor or two who can guide you through the process, both in terms of what to study, but also where to go. And that's how I would go about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Question in the chat, pretty good one. This is from Liz. So
Yeah.
I'm curious about how you were able to receive letters of rec for the PhD program after being out of school for a few years. I thought that's a good practical question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it kind of worked out in my favor in a couple ways. So I had employers. So an employer can also write you a letter, right? So somebody, especially if the employer has experience in the field that you're pursuing. So let's say, for example, I'm just making this up, Liz. I don't know if this is your case, but let's say you graduate from CSUN and you're a psych major, and you go and work in some field related to psychology for 3 or 4 years. And then you decide, I want to go get a PhD in psychology. Well, your supervisor or, the person who's in charge of the center or whatever it is you're working, that person can be a reference for you, can write a letter for you in most cases, not always. So some programs are going to specify it could be a professional reference or it has to be an academic reference. And if it's an academic reference, then typically they want that to be a professor, one of your former professors. And so what I would do is to, if you think there's any idea that you might want to go to graduate school, then maybe before you graduate, before you leave CSUN, you get professors to write a letter for you, like, as soon as possible. To say, just address it to Dear Graduate School Program. I know Liz. Liz was my student. She's wonderful. She took 3 classes with me. She got A's in all 3 classes. She'd be great in graduate school, et cetera, et cetera. And let's say maybe you don't make the decision to go for another 4 years. Well, you have that letter for starters. And even if you say, I need this letter to be more updated, I need this letter to be revised, you could always send a letter back and say, hey, Professor Harris, long time. I know it's been a while since we were last in touch. Here's what I've been doing. Here's what I've been up to. I'm ready to go to graduate school. Here's a letter you wrote for me a few years ago when I was at CSUN. Would you mind taking a look at it? And would you mind updating it? Right. So I think the key is to try to solidify those relationships while they're still, still fresh. But if you don't, if you're not able to do that, then it's still good to reach back to professors that you may have had. Some of them will ask you to draft the letter for them. And if that happens, don't take that as an insult. Professors are usually asked to write a lot of these letters. And so they're giving you the opportunity to really tell your story and to brag about yourself. So I would, by all means, I would say go for it. And then some professors will appreciate you. So you say, hey, Professor Harris, it's been a while, going to grad school, need a letter. Here's some talking points. Here's my resume. Here's some things I like you to. So whatever you can do to kind of make it easier for them, I think that's usually a good idea. But in my case, I was able to get at least one from my supervisor. And then because I had been taking classes, I had some professors who I was still in touch with and who I had me in class relatively recently that was able to write for me as well. So that helped out. Good question though. Yeah. Any other questions? What about questions? I know we have some faculty and staff and administrators here. Any questions from you all? Got another question. Best advice you have for CSUN students who might be struggling with motivation this semester? Well, first of all, understand you're not alone. I don't think it's just students that's struggling. I think all of us are struggling in one way or another, or at one time or another. I find, sometimes I have a hard time settling down and writing. I have a hard time doing it. So I think you just sort of recognize it is what it is. Don't beat yourself up about it. Try to exercise some good discipline. So try to do some things like, okay, I'm going to really focus for the next hour. If I can focus for the next hour, then I'm gonna give myself a break and I'm gonna, I'm gonna allow myself to go on social media for 15 minutes. I'm gonna, try to do something that helps to motivate you. It's part of what I would do. Try to build community, identify a friend, a classmate, an accountability partner, somebody that you can study with, somebody who, maybe you're in class with them and you both have an exam coming up or you both have a paper, set some deadlines for each other. So I would do those things, try to do those things, but what you can't do is you can't wake up on Thursday and look back on Wednesday and say, wow, I sucked Wednesday. I didn't do the work that I should have done on Wednesday. I'm a horrible student. I'm a horrible person. And allow what happened Wednesday to mess up your Thursday. And a lot of people do that. And so I think you got to take it one day at a time and, look forward. And the only time you look back is to pull a key lesson that you learned. But other than that, you keep it moving no matter what. Another question, how'd you make the decision between the PhD and the EDD, especially coming from a student affairs background? Great question. For the students who are here, I have an EDD, which is a educational doctorate. There's also the PhD. And so there are different degrees. The EDD has historically been for people who don't want to be researchers, who want to be practitioners, meaning that they want to work as a vice president, a dean. They want to work with students outside of the classroom. PhD is typically reserved for people who want to be researchers and ultimately want to be professors. Now, the fact of the matter is there's a lot of overlap between both degrees. And ultimately, what sort of decides what happens is the work that you do. So even though I have an EDD, I had done a lot of teaching, I had done a lot of research. So when I was applying for faculty jobs, I had a record of research. So I had publications, I had research presentations. And so for the most part, folks won't make a big deal about it. I mean, I think folks are, for the most part, interested in what you've done and, what you plan to do with the degree. But I would say this, if you know for certain that you want to be a professor, or you're fairly certain that you want to take the research route, then do the PhD. If you know for certain you want to be an administrator and you have no intentions on being a professor or doing research, then the EDD is going to be just fine. And so for me, I remember when I decided to make the decision, when I was sort of pursuing this, I wasn't planning to go and be a professor. I wasn't planning to be a researcher. My goal was to be a dean or a vice president of student affairs. So the EDD made sense at the time for me. But I'm doing, the work that I'm doing is really more in line with the PhD than it would be the EDD. In the end, just do good work and you'll be fine. It's sort of what I tell folks.
We have a raised hand, I think.
Yep.
We have
Yeah.
a raised hand. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hi, Dr. Harris. It's so nice to meet you. I'm really excited to be here. I'm actually a doctoral student in the CSUN's EDD program.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I'm in my year 2, and this is a very specific doctoral student experience question.
Yeah.
I'm kind of nerding out. I've been doing a lot of research. You're actually been reading a lot of your articles, especially about the 5 domains and SEO model. And I'm actually incorporating those into my theoretical framework and my own dissertation. So I'm really excited to meet you. You usually don't meet someone who you're following their work. I'm struggling right now. I just passed my exams and I'm moving forward into dissertation proposal, and I'm really struggling on my literature review. Do you have any advice on how to do a solid chapter 2? It gives me anxiety just thinking about writing it. And I've been writing it, but I'm struggling, and I would love to hear some advice on how really to get it going.
Yeah, good question, Christina. Thank you. Thank you for the compliments on my work. I hear somebody's reading it, I guess. Sometimes we publish this stuff and you don't know who's reading it or if it's having an impact or what. So it's really exciting to hear that. Chapter 2, the literature review. It's, yeah, I mean, it's probably the, of the 5 chapters, is the one that everybody probably hates the most, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So what I found helpful at the time, and it's been a while, in my case, but what I have my students do is I have them write annotated bibliographies. And I don't have them just sort of summarize things. So sometimes what folks will do is they'll read an article and they'll say, okay, they'll write a few sentences. Oh, this article, it was cool. It was about this, it was about that. Okay, on to the next one. So I actually give them a rubric. And if you email me, I'll send it to you. But I have a rubric that I created that asks them, it's about 12 questions about this one. And I say, you need to fill out this rubric for every article you read on your topic. And it's a lot of work and they hate it, but it makes the lit review process so much easier, because the whole idea with a lit review is you're sort of doing 2 things. You're trying to explain what we know about the topic based on what has been published in the literature, right? So you're kind of, retracing what has already been done. And people, can tend to do that pretty good. The hard part is identifying gaps in the literature. So, what is it that we know, but also what is it that we don't know? And how does my study answer the question about what we don't know? And it's hard to do that if you don't have a good sense of what, these studies have said. And so I find that particularly for students who maybe have a hard time getting it going, just read your article and fill out the template, right? And I also tell them, respond to the questions in the template in complete sentences.
Okay.
Because if you do that, then you might in many ways be able to copy and paste some of the sentences from your template into the actual document. And so that helps. But I'll send it to you, and it's, again, right? You got to be disciplined, set a goal for yourself. Try to do, 3 articles a day, 4 articles a day, read them, annotate them. And before you know it, you'll have some positive momentum, and it won't feel as much of a daunting task.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And yes, there are students reading your work. I have about 5 of your articles. So thank you so much. The work you did really inspired me to in my own work. So thank you so much. And I will definitely be emailing you. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you so much. Any other questions? All right, I prepared a presentation for you all. Let me show you, just to give you a sense of the flavor of my work. What are some of the stuff to kind of try to make it a little more concrete. So let me share my screen. All right. So, yep, you all know all this. Okay. So I want to introduce you all to this concept. My colleague, his name is J. Luke Wood. He's the Wood here. This concept that we recently created called race lighting. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of the phrase gaslighting. Has anyone ever heard of gaslighting? Okay, a few hands go up. All right, now here's the hard question. Would anyone like to explain what gaslighting is? Not like, I don't want like a textbook definition, but just, in your own words, right? If you're explaining gaslighting to a friend, what would you tell them that it was? What would it be? What is gaslighting? All right.
I can step in.
Yeah,
I would say gaslighting would be something that another person is talking about. It's like a serious subject, but kind of talking about it casually. Like, oh yeah, like I was told that you do such and such to this person, and I don't really see where this is gonna go. Like with that kind of tone of voice in there.
Oh, got it. So you're talking about the questioning.
Yeah.
Out there. Okay. Yeah.
That's the part that causes the anxiety in your chest.
Okay. That's part of it. All right. Who else? I see a hand here. but I don't see a name. It's the
Okay, I have Takia Moore.
okay, thank you, Melanie. Yep, you saw me struggling here. Thank you. Takia Moore, go for it.
No?
I do not have a definition.
Sorry, I'm seeing raised hands. So how about Ian? Ian Posey.
Yeah, so to me, gaslighting is kind of like someone making light of an instance that was like serious to someone else. Like if someone comes to you and expresses their feelings like, oh, I feel like, or like you've recently been treating me this in such a way, and someone goes, no, I haven't, I don't know what you're talking about. It's kind of dismissing their feelings on the matter by making it seem like it didn't happen.
Yeah, that's that really gets at it, right? It's when you're dismissive, it's when you belittle or invalidate someone's experience, something that's important to them. I think as Bakari shared, it's when you when your actions or your response, when you gaslight someone's experience in your response, that response can create anxiety and it can create doubt. Christina, I saw your hand. Do you want to go ahead and add to this?
Yeah,
I was just
Or
gonna
did
kind of.
two Christinas. Just kidding.
Oh,
You can
there's
go
two
ahead.
Christina. Sorry.
I think
Oh,
it was
go ahead.
Christina. Yep, go for it.
Christina Policarpio. Are you talking about me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I think just to kind of piggyback on what Ian said, it's more like that, but it also has like some kind of condescending like tone and like manipulative in a way, like a nonchalantly way. I think for me, that's what kind of some type of gaslighting is, you know, being manipulated at the same time, condescending in very like lighter kind of way.
Yeah, good, right? So there's an element of being condescending, and the other word that you shared that's important is manipulation.
Yes.
That's a key part of it also. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not. So I'm gonna flip for the sake of time, I'm gonna flip ahead here and kind of talk to you all. So my colleague Luke and I, we came up with this concept called race lighting. And you can think about race lighting as the gaslighting that happens in relation to race. So the definition we have, race lighting is the process whereby people of color question their own thoughts and actions due to systematically delivered racialized messages that make them second guess their own lived experiences with racism, right? So it's like, hey, I experienced racism. I know that what I experienced was racist, but the response that I got makes me question or second guess what it is that I experienced, even though I know what I experienced was real and true, right? And so what we said is, and what we tried to do is create like this model here. I'm going to walk you through it a little bit that kind of explains how race lighting happens. So first, whenever we're dealing with anything related to race or racism, it always starts with the things that you see on the left here: white supremacy, white nationalism, white fragility, anti-Blackness, anti-indigeneity, which is, sort of being, having a negative perspective towards the indigenous population, or capitalistic interest as well. And so we say that these things typically result in some kind of bias that we have, right? So, maybe if I'm white and I'm not very conscious, I might have a racial bias, right? If I am, anti-Black, I may have a bias against Black people, Black culture, and so forth. We know that our biases can sometimes be explicit, like be very aware of them, but they can also be implicit. So we may have biases that we don't even know about, right? And we say that bias, regardless of what it is, it leads to microaggressions. And microaggressions are let me sort of explain it. I'll give you the textbook definition of it. Microaggressions are the subtle messages. Sometimes they're brief, they're very common. Sometimes they're intentional, sometimes they're unintentional. They're definitely derogatory and condescending, but essentially what they do is they communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative insults towards people of color. So to give you some examples, of some common microaggressions. Oh, wow, Frank, you speak so well, right? So the idea that the way that I speak, that, you know, it exceeds your the low expectations that you had of me, right? Or when we say things that suggest that people of color are criminals or thugs, or when we devalue certain communities or communities of color, like when someone says, "Ooh, that's, you know, why would you want to live there? That place is ghetto," right? Those are all examples of some pretty common microaggressions. And of course, you know, ghetto communities are typically communities that are assumed to be highly populated by people of color and have a lot of crime and have a lot of violence, right? And so forth. And so those are microaggressions. Microaggressions tend to do one of three things. They can assault someone, they can insult someone, or they can invalidate someone. A micro assault is really more like an overt act of racism. So someone calling me the N-word would be a micro assault. It's very transparent. There's nothing subtle about it. Micro insults and micro invalidations are a lot more subtle. And so anyhow, so these things, when you experience a microaggression, it could lead to what we call race lighting. And race lighting is the doubt, race lighting is the questioning that comes with it. And so we find that race lighting can happen in one of three ways. First, someone can race light, or race lighting can happen just when someone microaggresses you. They didn't mean to do it, right? Oh, Frank, you speak so well. They was actually trying to compliment you, but you know, because of your past experiences, you experience that as a microaggression. That's one type of race lighting, right? And we call this type of race lighting passive race lighting. But there can also be a second kind of race lighting, which is what we call defensive race lighting. So someone microaggresses me. Oh, Frank, you speak so well. I challenge them on that. And they microaggress me again in order to defend themselves or defend what they said. That's an example of defensive race lighting. The last type is what we call active race lighting, when someone intentionally microaggresses you with the goal and with the intention of making you feel bad about yourself, making you feel lesser than, making you question your own lived experiences and so forth. That's the third type we call active race lighting. All race lighting, regardless of the type it is, leads to these three things. Racial battle fatigue, when you just feel a sense of exhaustion because you're always processing and dealing with racism and racialized messages. Stereotype threat is when you worry about confirming negative stereotypes that you know exist about your group. So for example, you know, I'm a Black man. I know that there's a stereotype about Black men not being smart, et cetera, et cetera. And so I feel an added sense of pressure in an academic experience. I feel an added sense of anxiety because I'm worried that if I don't do well in this class or if I don't do well on this test, that I'm going to confirm the stereotype that I'm not smart. And then the third one is imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome happens even when we experience success. So, you know, I'm a woman of color. I have a degree in the sciences. I have a PhD from Stanford or UCLA. I'm in a position of influence, but because of all the race lighting and the microaggressions I've experienced, even though I've been incredibly successful, I have quote unquote, proven myself, I still question and wonder, do I belong here? Do I have what it takes to be successful? So those are the three main consequences of racial gaslighting. So, of race lighting. So let me give you an example. Let me sort of share a narrative with you about a kid named Zachary that I think can kind of help it put all this and make it all make sense. And so let me introduce you to Zachary. So Zachary is a 19-year-old sophomore from Los Angeles who attends a university in Northern California. He's multiracial, so he identifies as you know, he has a Black mom and a Latino dad. He's very comfortable in his Black identity. He identifies as both Black and Latino on a regular basis. He's a biology major. He's hoping to go to med school after graduating. He has a 3.3 GPA. He's involved in a lot of clubs and organizations. He's secretary of the Black Student Union, and he's also an RA, right? He's had, for the most part, a pretty good college experience, a few issues here and there, but he's had a pretty good experience. So recently, Zachary had to go talk to one of his professors during office hours to discuss a grade that he got on an assignment. It was his political science class. And the assignment required students to write a paper on an issue that had some political significance, so some political issue. And Zachary, being the, well-informed, conscious young student that he is, decided to write his paper on the Black Lives Matter movement that took place in response to the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and other Black lives that were lost in 2020. When he got his paper back from the professor, he was surprised because most of his paper was covered in red ink, and he had been given a D on the paper. So Zachary was always told that he was a good writer, and he always got good grades on the writing assignments in his classes. In fact, in this very class, there were 2 other papers that the students had to do. He got an A- on the first paper and a B+ on the second paper. Most of the feedback he got on this paper seemed to be about the professor's feelings about the Black Lives Matter movement, calling it a terrorist organization and suggesting that the murders that they were protesting had nothing to do with race, but more so because these people didn't comply with the law. So Zachary politely pushed back on this and told the professor that while he respects his knowledge as a political scientist, he felt his grade on the paper was unfair and had more to do with how the professor felt about the movement than it was about the quality of his work. He also referred to the rubric that the professor used to grade the assignment to show the professor, like, hey, I did the assignment, I fulfilled all the requirements, I met the criteria. After a few minutes of back and forth, the professor became agitated and had this to say to Zachary, quote, "Listen, young man, in my class, we study political science, emphasis on the word science. If you want to write about fluff and propaganda and whine about oppression, maybe you should go take a class in ethnic studies, a class where the grading standards aren't very high and you can get an A just by showing up and talking." Zachary was immediately triggered by this comment and decided that he would leave the meeting. He thanked the professor for the meeting and he left. Here's where the race lighting comes in. For several days, he had a really hard time making sense of the meeting and wondered that maybe he was being too sensitive, or maybe he did write a bad paper, or even worse, maybe he offended the professor. He didn't feel comfortable returning to class and ultimately decided to drop the class. Zachary's story is it's a story that's based on, real events. And it's a classic example of race lighting. It's something that happens a lot to students of color in college. And so when we talk about, well, what do we do when we feel like we're being race lit? So first we have to learn about race lighting and learn about the factors that contribute to it. So learning about white supremacy and anti-Blackness and racial microaggressions and battle fatigue, because if you have an understanding of these things, then when it happens, you can, you're less likely to internalize it and to feel like it was something wrong with you. Second is engage in proactive and intentional self-care, right? So making sure you're taking care of yourself, making sure you're taking care of your health and well-being, creating counter spaces and building communities and support outside of the immediate environment. So when I'm talking with professors who say, my department is not a good place to be. I'm the only faculty of color there. My colleagues microaggress me. Then I say, make sure you're creating spaces outside of your department. Or if it's the whole university, make sure you're creating counter spaces outside of the university. And then lastly, you want to, leave the environment as soon as you can. It's not always possible to do this. We don't always have the agency or the capacity to do it, but as soon as you can, get yourself out of that toxic environment. And so I went through that relatively quickly, but I just want to kind of give an example of the kind of stuff that I do and that I talk about. And I don't know how we're doing on time, Melanie. I'm good to go if folks want to stay a little longer. Be happy to take some questions and sort of go as long as we can. Thank you all so much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Harris. That was amazing. we can't end on race lighting. We got to make sure that we're
Yeah, I
taking
know,
some
right?
questions on that. You can't leave us alone with that.
No, I won't leave you. Yeah, but I would happily entertain any questions.
We'll make sure we talk, and I want to thank you for your time and your candidness and spending time with us today. I'm sure, like many folks on the line, we're so moved by everything you're sharing with us today. And Bakari, do you have any?
All right, I don't want to end up like a Zachary. You know, I was hoping, if I was in the meeting with the professor, some words have been thrown, all respectfully, obviously, but some words would have been thrown. So how do Dr. Harris, how do you, I guess, navigate that situation? Because being a Black 18-year-old myself, I feel like Zachary handled it well. I wouldn't have.
Right.
I wouldn't have.
Well, so a couple things. So first, I want to be clear. Zachary didn't do anything wrong, right? There's nothing wrong with Zachary in this situation. Number one. What you said, Bakari, is important because these are triggering situations. And it's not just triggering because of what happened in the moment, but you start to think about and recall all the other racial stuff that you've been dealing with your whole life. And it all kind of, can brew it and explode in a moment. And so what I'm going to say is going to sound, a little bit cliche, but deep breathing. So making sure you take a breath, giving yourself time to pause and reflect and think, thinking through your response. And it's perfectly fine to, say, I'm sorry, I have to go. Get up and leave. But don't put yourself in a situation where you make a decision that you regret, an emotional decision, and, you say something that
Can't be taken back.
you would not have
context.
ordinarily said. Yeah. Which, and I say that with a lot of hesitation because it's easy to say and a lot harder to practice.
Definitely.
So I think kind of just, sort of having some understanding before you go into these situations and sort of understand that this is kind of part of being a person of color, in a society in which systemic oppression and white supremacy are real.
Mm-hmm.
I think having some understanding of that helps, but it's hard when I've said some things that I regret when I've been triggered in the moment as well.
Understandable.
Yeah, and so we're all human in that respect. We have to exercise some grace with ourselves, but try to, and understand it's not your job to change a racist person's mind or make them less racist. You can't do that. That's not your responsibility. And so what you do is you remove yourself from that situation and you seek help and seek counsel and seek support.
I think that last sentence, brother, was like the mic drop of like any presentation ever. You can't change a racist person's mind. So that was deep. I like that.
And it's not your responsibility.
It's not my responsibility.
You're responsible for it either. Is the other piece, right? Because a lot of times we put that on ourselves, or we take on the burden of trying to make somebody less racist or trying to navigate in these racist spaces. And what it does is it ends up impacting your mental and your physical, could impact your physical health, and it certainly impacts your productivity and your performance. Whether you're a professor, whether you're working in corporate America, whatever it may be, you're a student, it can have some impact on your performance. And so I try to let it go and not assume it's my problem. Easier said than done, though.
Definitely easier said than done. And Armin in the chat just brought up a really good question about microaggressions. If you want to take that, boss.
Is there any way to enforce people to not do microaggressions? Are there laws? Well, there are. There are laws against a lot of things, right? There are laws against police brutality. There's laws against discrimination, but those things still happen. And so I can't think of a law that makes people less likely to microaggress. This is why, for me, I think I'm on the, I like to think that I'm on the side of the equation that's kind of helping people to recognize them, understand their impact, and try to educate folks. But, you know, if you're working in human resources, you know, maybe if you're working as an administrator, you might have to be if you're a manager, you might have to be on the side of having to sort of respond to these things. And so, you know, I think additional training, I mean, that helps. Exposure to the concepts and ideas, those things help. But I think it takes a lot more than that. I think a lot of it is creating a culture to where folks know that it's not cool or not acceptable to do. It's a big part of it. Knowing that you're going to be called out on it is a big part of it.
Boss, I just want you to know you have tackled every single one of these questions with poise and finesse.
Thanks. I'm trying to be like you.
Appreciate it.
I used to, you know, I know I'm old now, but I used to be cool back in the day.
No, you still cool. Hold on, I saw the buttons open. I saw the little swagger. I got you.
Any others?
I do. This is more of a, I guess not what we talked about question, but how do you're to me, you and I know we just met, but you're like my role model right now. You're somebody I want to grow up to be. And what are some steps you took, whether that be through studying or self-discipline or stuff like that? How did you become Dr. Frank Harris III?
Well, thank you. That's yeah. You know, I think for me, I was blessed with the capacity to always be willing and interested in learning. I just enjoy learning. And so I think when you enjoy learning, and it's not just the learning, you know, you can read a book and learn, but I enjoy learning from other people. And I think that's helped me a lot. It's helped me discover information, concepts, and insights that I might not have otherwise discovered. I think when you learn from other people, you learn from their experiences. Some may be shared experiences, but others may not be. And then I think ultimately you end up forging relationships with people that really propel you personally and professionally. And so I say, you know, always be humble, never assume that you know it all. Never assume you can't learn from somebody, right? So I'm a professor, but I learn a lot from my students, and I don't ever assume that I can't learn from them. And so I think when you're always open to learn, when you're open to learning, you always have the capacity to grow and get better. And I think sometimes, particularly for us as men of color, there's a lot of pressure to feel like we got it all figured out, that we know everything, you know, that we're confident. And that comes because we, you know, the fact of the matter is, you know, we live in a society that is constantly telling us that we're lesser than, either directly or more either implicitly or more explicitly, or telling us, limiting us in terms of what we can do or who we can be. And so I think that can create a false sense of confidence, that can create a tendency to come across as being secure. And when you do that, then I think it makes it harder to learn and grow. And so I think I always just try to sort of, you know, be mindful of that and challenge that. Now, don't get me wrong. I can be stubborn, right? I can, you know,
you a person.
Don't tell me what to do. Like I can be like that, but I try not to be, at least not in my professional life. How about that?
I have a question.
Yep.
Are you available to like mentor like people, or is there anybody like you that can like mentor people?
Yeah, good question. Is it Valentine or Valentin?
Valentine, like the holiday.
Yeah, good question. So absolutely. But here's what I'm going to also encourage, and this is for everybody: have multiple mentors, right? So don't just say, hey, you know, Melanie's my mentor and I'm good, right? Everybody, I still have mentors, and I have a lot of people. And when you seek out mentors, be clear about what it is you want from them. right? So maybe for me, it's like, hey, I want guidance on grad school stuff, or I want guidance on navigating, academia as a man of color. But maybe somebody else, they can give you more career advice, or maybe somebody else can give you guidance more on health and wellness. And so I think it's important to have a team of folk, a team of mentors, and knowing, who can provide what, who do you go to for what, I think is a big part of it. And then also, I would think about, I guess it's kind of hard to call them mentors if you don't have a relationship with them, but I'll say this. So I think about people like Michael Eric Dyson, who's this big time scholar. Some of you may know him. Or people like Jay-Z, right? I've never met Michael Eric Dyson. I've never met Jay-Z, but I feel like I've learned a lot from them just by observing them, reading their stuff, watching speeches, watching videos. And so I think right now we live at a time when we have access to information, and sometimes we have access to people without having direct access to them. And so, yeah, I'm available, absolutely. But I'm only one person. And so think about who your whole team is going to be, right? Is what I would say. But yeah, for sure. Maybe one more question, and then we'll let Dr. B close us out. All right.
All
So
right.
Dr. B, yeah, it looks like yep.
Well, thank you so much for sharing the space with us, Dr. Harris. We always enjoy just what you have to share, and I'm so glad that students were here and able to experience this. We will be having our second event with Dr. Harris March 30th, so look out for that. That's going to be coming up soon. And I just want to thank everyone for sharing openly in this space. I want to thank Bakari for keeping us in line and making sure that we had some good questions for Dr. Harris today. I appreciate, seeing so many wonderful folks in this space. So thank you so much for joining us, and more to come in March, later in March. So we'll keep this party rolling into March. All right.
Thank you so much. Big shouts to Dr. B for her leadership and providing this space and forum for us to have a good conversation. Of course, Bakari was an amazing MC. I'm not gonna call you a host, I'm gonna call you an MC. And then all the students and colleagues who showed up and asked questions. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much.
It was amazing.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Before we go, I do have a question. How are we going to get the
Yeah.
link to the next discussion so we can, I guess, try to get more of a turnout so we can get a little bit more student dialogue going on?
For sure. We'll be sharing a flyer. We'll also be adding the event to the university calendar.
Oh, hold on. That's a thing.
We'll make sure that we continue to push out these events. We know it's tough to get you all back on Zoom after having a full day on Zoom classes. So I get it. But I'm glad that we'll be able to share this recording to just show folks what it's like to be in this space, because it's hard to know what you're getting into when you jump into Zoom spaces. So hopefully that helps as well, get the word out to students that they're welcome in this space.
I also have a question. I jumped on this for extra credit and I kind of got blown away by everything.
That's good.
Where are some of your links, Dr. Harris, of your dissertations and things that you've wrote? So I know exactly who you are. Some of the things that I kind of agreed with you, some of them I really didn't. But if I can read some of your work, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know if we lost Judy, but
Okay.
thank you, Judy. I'm glad you joined.
No, did you hear me?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. I deeply apologize. I have very poor internet service. No, I was stipulating. I just wanted links. I'm trying to get a better understanding of who you are. Like, no disrespect. I mean, like some of the things I did agree, some of the things I didn't. But I would like to read your work.
Yeah, for sure. I just put my website. Cindy posted as well. So I got a website with all of that. And I think disagreement, that's part of, interacting in a learning environment. And so, yeah, I think disagreement is good. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate the investment in wanting to know more. And I
Yep.
think that's really important right? Because this is just a one snapshot of Dr. Harris's work. And so getting more familiar with what the body of work he has out there, I think is a really great step. So I appreciate that. I think that's the right steps to take.
Thank you. And I would say there's stuff that I wrote 10 years ago that I look back like, I don't think that was right. I think that was, so I think it's part of our growth and evolution as people and scholars. So that's all good.
Yeah, and we'll be curating a folder to share with all of you as well, so that you can also look at some of the work that's out there. But I feel like Dr. Harris is everywhere, especially lately. So there's lots of webinars to check out and look at, just to kind of get a sense of what you're doing now and the role that you're playing in such a crazy time that we're living in.
Yeah, thank you. Insurrections, elections, and all kind of stuff.
All kinds of stuff going on. Pandemics.
Yep, pandemics. Yeah.
No rest for the weary.
Oh, did we lose Melody? Oh no, there you are. Yep.
Here.
All right.
All
Well, thank
right.
you all.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you to
all.
our interpreters also.
Yes.
Oh, you guys killed it.
Excellent
Yeah.
job today.
You guys killed it.
Yep. Sorry. Yeah. For Kevin, Cindy, and Amber. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Yep.